So I want to welcome everyone. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Bob Reiter. I am president of the Chicago Federation of Labor. The CFL represents 300 unions that in turn represent 500,000 working people in Chicago and Illinois. And what I would typically say is from airline pilots to zookeepers. But I think I think we really have to, in this moment, have to really talk about all the different public service workers that we represent as well. You know, from firefighters, to social workers, to teachers, to people who work at the Environmental Protection Agency. We represent scientists and saviors, right? Nurses, doctors.
Yeah.
The list of things that we represent in the public and government sector, especially now with what we've seen happening with the war on federal workers. Can't speak, you know, more intensely enough or aggressively enough to highlight what's going wrong in this country today. Before we dive deeper into that, I'd like to thank SEIU Healthcare and President Greg Kelly for hosting us tonight. The National AFL-CIO, represented by Secretary Treasurer Fred Redmond, and other representatives from the Department of People Who Work for a Living. And give you the acronym, but that's longer than the speech. Chicago Jobs with Justice, our partner in these hearings that have given workers a voice and a platform to speak about what's happening here with our workforce. You know, like I said, it feels like the attack on working people has not stopped since January 20th. Almost every week, President Trump sets his sights on a new federal agency to deconstruct and destroy. It sounds dramatic, but as someone who works in the labor movement that has seen union workers at the Veterans Administration lose their collective bargaining rights as a quote unquote matter of national security. I mean, that's absurd. The Veterans Administration, the Veterans Administration doesn't construct weapons of war or does cartography to decode classified information. The VA is there, so when my uncle, who's a Vietnam vet, needs to go for his PTSD treatment, for his Agent Orange treatment, for any basic medical care, because he's reliant on the VA to provide his health care, they're hurting him. They're hurting him, and they're hurting the healthcare providers, the nurses, the doctors, all the support staff. How is that? If anything, taking away collective bargaining rights from people who work at the VA, that's a national security issue.
That's right.
So what do? We fight back. We fight back by making our voices heard. I had someone the other day say to me, well, he's the president. We have to respect the process. Let me tell you a little bit about this process. The process is me and all my friends and my colleagues and the other 30,000 people that were out on the street with me a couple weeks ago using our First Amendment rights. And I don't care if the president is a Democrat, a Republican. I've had at varying levels policy differences with every president in my adult life. And I will tell you that part of the process is raising your concerns and calling bullshit on someone when they're not doing the right thing. That's what we're doing. That's respecting the process. That is calling it out, using the courts is calling it out because our government has three co-equal branches. And they have enumerated powers for the executive branch. Congress passes laws. If the laws exceed what they are supposed to do, you have the court system. The court system also will look at the executive branch if it exceeds its powers. That's what we do in this country. That's respecting the process. Respecting the process is following that structure, that division of power. Now, I say that even though I believe, based on the policies of this Congress and even the court, don't line up with my worldview. However, I do have respect for the institution of the Supreme Court, which I believe hasn't completely blown all the guardrails off of our country. We respect the process. 2 years, we get to make decisions about what's happening in our elections in Congress. That is respecting the process. What are we going to do here today? Well, this is also part of the process. We're here to listen to workers under attack, and we're going to support them. We're learning about their struggles and how their struggle has a ripple effect that touches all workers. We're doing this when it comes time to take to the streets and protest. We're ready. Tonight, we have workers from NIOSH and OSHA. NIOSH is the National Institute for Occupational Safety and Health. It is the research and education body of federal worker health and safety standards, which informs how OSHA will handle enforcement. For those of you who don't know, that this, when you have a personal protective equipment, which I may need now, so I have all kinds of particulates coming out of me. They set the standards which which governs everything. OSHA is the Occupational Safety and Health Administration. This is the enforcement body which takes its recommendations from the research and studies done by NIOSH in order to set safety standards, create trainings, and enforce standards and regulations through worksite inspections. The job these workers perform impacts workplaces everywhere. Their job is to keep us all safe. Now, along with just about everything in government, they're under attack. And this is one of the places where we certainly need to put a lot of focus, along with collective bargaining, the National Labor Relations Act and the National Labor Relations Board, and the other functions of the Department of Labor. If we start rolling back science and the responsibility that NIOSH has, we take away critical research from NIOSH. If we handcuff OSHA, those are people's lives. They're either their lives right now or the lurking dangers that we're not looking to create solutions for going forward. Now I want to hand it over to my partner over at the CFL, someone who's been out on the streets with me, but more importantly, he's been working to put on these hearings and give workers a voice, CFL Secretary Treasurer Don Millar.
Thanks, Bob. Good evening, everyone. Don Millar, Secretary Treasurer of the Chicago Federation of Labor. So this is going to be our sixth civil servant speak out. And, the first time we heard from EPA and how, the environment, our air, food and water is in danger, right? Army Corps of Engineer. We heard from Army Corps of Engineer how, guess what? They are stripping the Army Corps to the point that we're gonna have some, if it's a spring thaw right now, we're gonna have more floods across the Midwest, across the country. We're already seeing that. And, Social Security, guess what? If you're gonna apply for Social Security, you're gonna have to wait a while, right? And then EPA, VA, all of the people who work at the VA and the veterans who we're supposed to care for, they are in jeopardy. And then the EPA has been labeled a threat, to an enemy of the state because they're trying to protect our air, our soil, our water. And we heard from TSA, right? Transportation, aviation sector, that's going to be in trouble right now if they keep eviscerating, if they gut the TSA. And, I mean, right now, we're seeing how, the skies, I mean, people are traveling, but we're hearing a lot of stories, right? From aviation. And that's just the surface of it. And, and then, the postal carriers. And how all over the country, we depend on the letter carriers and the US Mail. And then also education. $65 billion in Illinois alone funds higher ed. And I know we have some U of I folks, UIC folks, some higher ed folks. $65 billion that he wants to gut. You think that's you lose programs, students won't be able to go to school. So what's going on is impacting everybody. And the work that our civil servants do each and every day, it's vital. And we depend on that. And, there's something we say in the AFL-CIO, work connects us, right? Work really does connect us. The work that federal workers, civil servants do, our public sector, it is vital to each and every day of our lives. So that's what we've been doing since February. Man,
February.
geez, that's it seems like a year ago, but it was only 2 months ago, right? And I want to welcome Jill Enrique, Executive Director of Jobs and Justice, and Drew West, Chair of the Jobs and Justice.
Brenda?
It's not one right.
There's actually multiple mics.
Started this series of hearings. And typically what we do prior to January 20th is if workers are in struggle, if workers are in conflict, if workers are out on strike, we hold hearings for them. And we invite members of the union to come and talk about their experiences and talk about their jobs. And then we open the floor to conversation. And that is, in many ways, the most powerful part of the hearings that we have, because people get to tell their stories. You get to tell your story. You learn what you have in common with the people who are being mistreated, mishandled, and who are in struggle. We decided to do these hearings in part because we figured that most people don't know what the federal agencies actually do. And so there is a kind of common misconception that they're really just not doing much of anything, just a bunch of bureaucrats, that kind of stuff. Not true. So one of the things that I love that has come out of these hearings is that people have a much clearer understanding of what the government agencies actually do for the public. To me, one of the most moving moments in this whole process has been when we were talking about the VA and we had a Navy veteran who sat on the panel and almost cried when he was talking about losing VA services. And I think, to me, when a grown man is willing to allow himself to be vulnerable in public, that tells you something very powerful about the situation that he is dealing with. So I'm so glad you're all here. I also would encourage you, when you do have issues beyond these federal agencies, please get in touch. And we will do our best to support you as best we can. Our goal in all of this is not only knowledge and information, it's solidarity.
So I'm Jill Enrique, Executive Director of Chicago Jobs with Justice. If you don't know who we are, you should check us out online. Instagram is probably better than Facebook, but you should know that too. I want to thank the CFL and Rinda and the Workers' Rights Board for starting this series. Like Rinda said, it's been really eye-opening. I know, and I was telling Tessa this earlier, that every time we do one of these, my mind is blown by what I didn't know. You don't often think about the Army Corps of Engineers, well, at least I don't. Not on a daily basis, but I'm sure people that live along the Mississippi River do. And people that live by dams and viaducts and now I do too. So, so thank you very much for being here, and, we do these now monthly, it seems, but as Bob was saying, we're under attack constantly, and that's not even really being dramatic, and I'm a very dramatic person. So stay tuned and subscribe to our email so you can keep up to date. What's happening.
Oh, yeah, you guys can sit down. Yeah. And I want to welcome AFL-CIO, CIO Secretary Treasurer Fred Redmond. Thank you, Fred. As you know, Fred is from Chicago. Welcome home.
Thank you all for being here today, and I want to thank SEIU Healthcare and Jobs with Justice for hosting us this evening. And a special shout out to Bob Ryder and Don Villar and the entire Chicago Federation of Labor, the entire team for their role in putting on this important discussion. Look, I'm gonna be brief because the point of this is not to listen to me or other leaders in the room, but to hear from you. You know, we want to hear from the workers whose voices have not been sufficiently heard throughout this whole ordeal, about the impact that the cuts to the federal workforce have had on lives and on folks' communities. Because, you know, the AFL-CIO, we formed this department of people that work for a living because we know that workers are the true experts in our society. We make the economy work. It's workers who wake this country up every morning. And tuck this country to sleep at night. Workers. And we run programs and services with dedication and pride. And so it's important to us. It's important to those who really want to know what's happening. It's important that workers tell their stories, to put a human face to the cuts and explain the work we do, and it's important, and how these haphazard cuts, unthought of cuts, cuts that have not been vetted, cuts that have not been thought through, how these cuts reach far beyond the individual workers and their families, but it ripples out and hit every segment of our society. So it's important for us to show, for example, how reducing 10,000 jobs in health and human services is devastating to those individual workers, but it's also devastating to society at large. A reduction in force impacts programs like Medicare and Medicaid, and it leads to disruptions in necessary care, and it makes nursing homes less safe for patients and caregivers alike. And, you know, as we go through this unimaginable situation that we're going through now, consumers are less protected from surplus and surprise medical bills, and research efforts for life-saving treatments are hampered or discontinued. And our nation's ability to respond to outbreaks of dangerous diseases is severely reduced. So it is our job to put a finger on the number and says, this cut, this rift, this is what it means to you and your future. It's gonna take us workers to call this out. And that is why it matters. And unfortunately, we have a lot of things to point to, because the attacks by this administration on everything we stand for has been relentless. Attacks on women, on federal workers, on diversity, equity, and inclusion. Attack on veterans, on government institutions and services, on the legal system, on free speech, on our unions and the rights of workers, including the fundamental right to collectively bargain. See, when Donald Trump stripped hundreds of thousands of federal workers on their right to collective bargain just a few weeks ago, this was their most blatantly anti-worker, anti-union action to date. But it's more than that. It's an assault on the entirety of the labor movement, because there isn't a more fundamental core value of the labor movement than the right to collectively bargain. And if the President of the United States can eliminate collective bargaining for federal employees with the stroke of a pen, if he can do that to workers in the federal sectors, then we are all fools if we think he won't try to take over our rights to organize and bargain in the private sector next. And look, we just can't let that happen. We need to stand together in solidarity, every worker, every union, true solidarity. I'm talking about the type of solidarity where your strike is my strike. And where your contract campaign is my contract campaign. Where the saying that an injury to one is injury to all is more than a saying, but a commitment to our most fundamental of values. So this evening, we're going to hear from workers, those who have been injured by these senseless cuts, whose jobs are now less safe and more exposed to occupational disease. And we'll hear from workers whose jobs are critically important for a functioning society. So this is week 2 of these hearings at the AFL-CIO. Last week we conducted hearings just like this one in Macon, Georgia, and Asheville, North Carolina. I'm leaving here tomorrow morning, going to Davenport, Iowa, and we're going through Pennsylvania. We're going all over this country to make sure that workers' voices are being heard. And then later this week, we're going to Charlotte, North Carolina. We have other plans, hearings in Maine and other parts of this country later this month. And what our intention is to compile all this testimony, oral and written, for a report to our elected leaders. So we're going to put your stories, your reality, in front of the leaders of the House and the Senate, and in front of the President, his White House staff, and yes, we're going to put your stories in front of his favorite billionaire. And, we're going to demand. That's what we do as a labor movement. There's more of us than there is them. We're going to demand our elected leaders understand the gravity that their haphazard actions have had on our families and our communities, and why our jobs and our roles are important in a functioning society. And we're going to help our elected leaders understand that you can't destroy our basic civil and human rights, that you can destroy the rights of workers and the labor movement, but only with the fight. There will be a fight. And it's going to take your stories to help us draw that line in the sand, where we're going to do what the labor movement does. We're going to resist these haphazard cuts. We're going to resist this attack on workers in this country, and we're going to help our elected leaders understand the true meaning of solidarity, and that a strong and united labor movement will not only stop these abuses, but we're going to start building a future for workers, shaped by workers. And that's what we're going to do. So look, I'm looking forward to hearing your stories of building that future along with you. And we must always remember that in this country that we all love, okay, in this country that we all love, we cannot sit idly by and watch the destruction of our democracy, trying to build a country by the billionaires that work for the billionaires. Okay, so as workers, as an organization, the AFL-CIO, with job standing, with Jobs for Justice and other community groups, we're going to build that future. Because I believe one day our children and our grandchildren are going to hold us accountable and want to know how we responded at this moment. Okay, thank y'all very much. Let's hear it.
I want to ask Vice President, SEIU Healthcare, and also, Health Systems Chief, to also join the panel. And want to say a few words?
Well, first of all, we would just like to welcome you here to SEIU Healthcare, Illinois and Indiana. We are a union of 90,000 members across Illinois, Indiana, Missouri, and Kansas. And we represent hospital workers, home care workers, nursing home, and childcare workers. And these are industries that are industries of caring. So these are jobs in which people do because they want to be doing them and they care for our communities. These are also some of the most dangerous jobs out there, because if they don't get done, someone is harmed. And if we wait sometimes until we have all the resources we need and all the staff we need, then we waited too long and someone is harmed. And so these are industries that are incredibly unsafe, and when we make cuts to them, the outcomes are even worse. We also represent 3,000 members here in Illinois and Indiana at the Department of Veterans Affairs, at Jesse Brown and at Hines, which is, the bullseye attack from Donald Trump with his greedy eyes on the privatization of the VA. So.
Thank you, Ian. And our first witness, our first testimony, Brent Barron, President of AFG, Department of Labor, 648.
Thank you. My name is Brent Barron. I'm president of AFG Local 648. I represent the Department of Labor employees in the state of Illinois, Indiana, Wisconsin, and Minnesota. I represent OSHA, Wage and Hour, Bureau of Labor Statistics, and a whole bunch of other agencies within the Department of Labor. I know this hearing is about OSHA, but I want to read to you something tonight that went to the whole Department of Labor. And this is probably going through every agency in the land. And this is probably why people are really scared right now. This is coming from the Chief of Staff of the Department of Labor. I would like to remind all Department of Labor employees of the vital duties and responsibilities you uphold. Your work on behalf of the American people. As part of these duties and responsibilities, you are expected to confidentially and deliberatively process information. This may encompass DOL policy development, enforcement strategy, and other confidential information. There are several government-wide and DOL statutory authorities related to the proper handling of confidential government information. He goes on to name a bunch of stuff. We're aware of reports that current employees have engaged in unauthorized communication with members of the press, former DOL employees, and other third parties. Agency employees are not permitted to discuss DOL non-public, pre-decisional, or confidential information with anyone outside the agency. This applies to all forms of communication, including information, conversation, emails, texts, and social media. Individuals who disclose confidential information or engage in unauthorized communication with the media may face serious legal consequences, including potential criminal penalties, depending on the nature of the information and applicable laws, and may face immediate disciplinary actions up to and including termination from the Department of Labor. This message will serve as your only warning. That went out to every employee at the Department of Labor tonight at 3:41. From the Chief of Staff from the U.S. Department of Labor, the agency that is emboldened to protect the American workforce. And if you don't think that sends a chilling message to the people at work to enforce the labor laws in this country, I don't know what more you need. You're looking at a man who's you can't kill because I'm born to hang. I'm here speaking to you tonight, and probably tomorrow I'll probably be terminated. Okay? I've already been in Bloomberg Law. I've been in the Chicago Tribune last week, exposing them for what they did last Wednesday to one of our units. At 3:40 in the afternoon, all the employees in the occupational, it's the Office of Federal Contract Compliance Programs. That's the agency that enforces federal EEO hiring for federal contractors. Every employee in that agency was basically sent home, except for one unit in Dallas and a little unit out in the national office. They're all sent home. They're put on administrative leave. A lot of those employees were coerced into signing a deferred resignation email last Friday. And last Friday was their last day working for the Department of Labor. The rest of the employees were gonna try and ride it out. They were put on administrative leave and they're waiting for their reduction in force notice so they can be terminated. This is real, folks. This is why I can't get a live OSHA employee here to talk to you about their story right now, because they're worried about losing their jobs, their livelihoods. I put this out on social media back in January. When did dedicated federal employees, for whatever agency they work for, whether it's the VA, the Department of Labor, EPA, or any of them, when did they become the enemy? All they did is they went in and they did their job to enforce the mission of their agency. They believe in the mission of their agency. I'm here to advocate on behalf of those employees with management. But how can I advocate for those employees when I have an administration that detests what they do? Utterly detests what they do. They send out repeated email telling them, resign your low productive federal job and go get a job in the private sector. These are people that have dedicated their lives to enforce the mission of their agencies. OSHA inspectors, they're going out there trying to protect you and your family members. I'm going to go back a little bit. OSHA came about in 1970 because at that point in time, approximately 17,000 people a year were dying in workplace injuries. Our last liberal president, Richard Nixon, signed the Occupational Safety and Health Act into law. Okay? And since then, OSHA has reduced the number of people dying in workplace injuries to 5,000. That's still way too many people dying on the job, folks. Anybody who goes to work should be able to come home at the end of the day. This administration wants to gut OSHA. They want to gut wage and hour. They want kids working back in factories. Wage and Hour just busted a bunch of slaughterhouses last year for having minors working on the kill room floor at night. And the only reason they caught them is when the kids went to school, they were falling asleep in class. And then their teacher found out and then they reported them. Wage and Hour went out and it's scandalous what they did. That made the New York Times. Guess what? As soon as it hit the New York Times, here came more complaints and more complaints. We're safer today than we ever have been, but guess what? Tomorrow I'm not so sure. But I want to thank you all for being here tonight. I want to thank you. I want to remind one thing. Someone said, when there's a strike, federal employees cannot strike. The only thing we can do is go to Congress and beg Congress, do this for us. Please do this for us. So what we're asking you is help us, help our federal workers that we represent. Thank you, Don, for inviting me tonight.
You are greatly pleased. Thank you.
Thank you.
And, Brent's talking about workplace safety and, people, and the dangers that workers have to face. And I want to, call up President of the IAFF Local 2, Chicago Firefighter, Pat Cleary.
First of all, I'd like to thank the CFL, AFL-CIO, all the large unions, small unions, everyone for supporting us. Whether we go down to Springfield to pass legislation, we'll go down together. Whether we're trying to get a contract, other unions came to our side. We're still pushing for a contract. When we went down to DC to pass the Social Security Fairness Act, we went down there as a group and got the job done. And here we are today. So with that, thank you for inviting me here and allowing me to speak about recent cuts in the federal government. My name is Patrick Clary, and I'm the president of the Chicago Firefighters Union, Local 2. We represent approximately 5,000 active firefighters and paramedics and approximately 3,000 retirees. And I've been a member of the union for over 37 years. The recent cuts in the federal government have affected the fire service throughout our country and include some of the following programs that directly affect our workers. The National Fire Registry for Cancer, which is part of the CDC. They study, understand, and reduce cancer rates in firefighters. And as an example, they'll compare our cancer rates, fire service employees, with the cancer rate of the general public. And we use that to show that we're getting these cancers more than the general public because of what our work duties are. Also, another study they did was with New York. They showed all the very oddball cancers that they came down with as a result of the World Trade Center. Not only were those people, the New York firefighters, affected by that, but other Chicago firefighters from throughout the country went down there to help and inhale all those toxic fumes. So we use this cancer registry to show we are getting cancer because of our job. So that's one program. Another program that's being reduced is the National Institute for Occupational Safety and Health, which is part of the CDC. They make recommendations for the prevention of injury, illness, disability, and death. NIOSH provides a firefighter fatality and investigation program, which investigates line of duty deaths for firefighters and paramedics, and provides recommendations to the fire department to prevent these incidents from happening again. NIOSH also conducts research on firefighting equipment, PPE, which is our protective gear, SCBAs, and I'll give you a couple examples of how this directly affects us, them reducing this program. We recently, which was 2021, we had a firefighter named Firefighter Plumber that died. NIOSH came out and we just got the report, and they were just able to get it out before all the cuts. And thank goodness they were able to do that for that. In that report, NIOSH came out and said, you need to increase your manning, and you need to bring back what's called battalion chief aides, because a very important part of the mayday for that firefighter was not heard. And had the battalion chief aide been there, that would have been heard. So that's why we're pushing for these things. So that report came out. I'm not just saying that, NIOSH is saying this. Another thing is we have PFAS in our firefighter gear. PFAS is it's a cancerous substance that's on top of our gear. They're conducting studies on our behalf to show that this chemical should not be on our gear, and they need to find a different chemical to put on our gear that's non-cancerous. Also, they do studies on our SCBAs so that to show how much pressure you can put in it. In the SCBA bottle, how long do you want a firefighter to go inside of a fire structure? You don't want to overwork them, give them too much air, so they conduct studies about how much time you should spend inside that fire. With your gear being on, you're kind of baking inside of the fire structure. We're doing studies on how our PPE is suffocating us. So these are very important programs that we use. So when we want to change our gear, we use these studies to prove that what we're saying is correct. Another program is the World Trade Center Health Program. As I was saying, they're a part of the Department of Health and Human Services. And they provide studies and provide health care to all the 9/11 workers and survivors. To this day, we are still having New York firefighters primarily coming down with cancers back from 2001. So these studies prove that this cancer is related to their job. But it also protects all the other firefighters that responded to the World Trade Center. And if they come down with an illness that's associated with that catastrophe, they'll get the proper health care. All of these fire service programs are being delayed, diminished, or removed. And it's up to the union employees throughout the United States to stand up for what's right. All employees deserve the right to a safer work environment and the ability to return home to their families at the end of their shifts. Currently, the International Association of Firefighters is working with Congress to have this justice resolved. I encourage all unions to contact their legislators and demand that these employees and programs be reinstated. And there's another program that was recently dismantled, which was the federal mediators. When we go to arbitration, we use federal mediators and we're comfortable using them when we know who they are and we know which ones are good for certain topics. Well, they're all gone now. So now we have to rely on AAA, which we're not as familiar with, but we will use them until we get these federal mediators back. So all these cuts have a direct effect on firefighters. And there's another topic, OSHA, and I'm gonna introduce my Vice President, Eric Simons. He's gonna come up real quick and discuss how OSHA affects our job directly. I was a Vice President for 4 terms. I probably filed 60 complaints with OSHA pertaining with the fire department and what was wrong with our equipment, with the fire scene, our firehouses, with our fire rigs. So Eric's gonna come up and explain that. Thank you very much.
Thank you all for having us today, and
Thanks for having us as a part of it. It's very, very exciting to see everybody get together and fighting this the way they should. My name is Eric Simons. I'm Vice President of Local 2. In this role, I'm in charge of our health and safety. So as you can imagine, as a firefighter, it's there's a lot to be concerned about. As firefighters, we go to work understanding that people rely on us. They rely on us, whether it would be for, they got in a car accident, their house is on fire, obviously. They're sick, they're having a heart attack, there's a flood, there's been tornadoes, a tree went through their front window. Anything that possibly happens, they rely on us. And as firefighters, we hate to ever admit that we rely on anybody, because everybody relies on us. 2 groups that we rely on are NIOSH and OSHA. Without them, our job is not even possibly safe. And the research that comes out of NIOSH is something that we rely on because we still do die in the line of duty regularly. We die early in retirement regularly because of our job. So this is something that we absolutely direly need and cannot go away. Like Pat touched on, NIOSH evaluates our PPE and our respirators. So with our respirators, there's the best they've ever been in the history of the fire service. Every year they get better. And you would think that most of our job would be carcinogens or inhaled, right? Some of them you're absorbing through your skin, it ends up. And where before, the #1 killer of firefighters was heart attacks. It's now cancer. And our cancer numbers are going through the roof. Our job is technically safer than it ever has been, but our cancer numbers are going through the roof. And that's because we found out that our gear that we wear gives us cancer, like you talked about PFAS. PFAS is chemicals, a lot of things that you guys wear. But specifically, we're wearing it when we're overheated and all of our pores are open. We're absorbing this directly into our bloodstream and is giving us all kinds of cancer. NIOSH is the place that is researching this to figure out, try to pinpoint this, and what they could do to make our gear safe. So our gear isn't giving us cancer. But as firefighters, we didn't see the mind so much if it was the smoke because we were in trying to save your life. But now it's just the gear that's protecting us is giving us cancer. So they've done a ton of research on that, and there's still an ongoing project, but it's not an ongoing project if you don't have NIOSH. National Firefighter Cancer Registry, Chicago, had just joined. We were going to have a full partnership where labor, Local 2, and the city of Chicago, we were all on the same page. And we were gonna be part of the Firefighter Cancer Registry. A week later, that was shut down. So for over a decade, when Pat was the vice president, he was trying to get this going and it was just one or the other. Labor or the city wasn't on the same page. We're finally all on the same page and it's gone. The firefighter fatality investigations. Beyond the fact that they help us, this is the pull no punches. We will go through every nitty gritty detail. Nobody is safe. We will tell you exactly what happened when this firefighter died. These were your breakdowns, communications. You should have a chief doing this. You should have had somebody doing this. Doesn't matter, you know, if they were a good guy or not, or anything like that.
They're going to tell you exactly where the breakdowns were, and we need to hear those things so we can learn from them. We develop all of our training from them. That is gone. They have enough investigators to finish the backlog. There is a backlog of line of duty deaths that they're investigating, but after that, it's done. So if somebody dies on the job today, we won't know exactly what happened. We won't. There was 873 jobs nationally that served over 1 million firefighters, and that's gone. That is absolutely ridiculous. We demand this changes. I think you demand this changes, and ultimately, citizens will demand that this change. If you attack our safety, you're attacking citizen safety. If we're not safe, we can't get there to help you. And if we can't get there to help you, people will die. Our members will die. And this is something we won't ever accept. And then I'm gonna move on to OSHA. Because OSHA is, since their inception, has started the fire brigade standards. And fire brigade standards were at first for private fire departments. So your oil refineries, they have private fire departments. We don't think a lot about these things in Chicago, but there's a lot of industry that has fire departments. They've moved on and forward into affecting our fire service. Well, the fire service is constantly changing. And as it's changed, the fire brigade standards were set to change in the next year or so. They've had the final draft of it, but that's done right now. And in there are things that shows how our job has changed and gives us the protections that we need. He's filed 60 OSHA complaints. I don't know how many I have, but plenty. I talk to OSHA on a regular basis. They're honestly our best friend. We rely on these two groups so much just to make sure we're safe so we can be safe to come and get you guys. So I appreciate everybody's support. Keep the fight going. Thank you.
And that's so important that OSHA and NIOSH does. And also here in Chicago, UIC School of Public Health. And I'd like to welcome Professor. Testimony.
Thank you so much for having me today to participate in this hearing. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the National Institute for Occupational Safety and Health, OSHA, or NIOSH, sorry, here at home. My name is Tessavani. I'm a faculty member at UIC in the School of Public Health, where I'm an occupational health researcher and also an educator. I also completed my training at UIC in industrial hygiene, which is the science and practice that aims to protect and promote the health and well-being of workers by anticipating, recognizing, evaluating, and controlling workplace hazards. I would like to state for the record that the opinions today are mine and not necessarily the opinions of UIC or NIOSH. As you may have heard, NIOSH faces severe operational disruptions due to massive federal staffing cuts, with around 850 of its 1,000 employees ripped. NIOSH is the federal agency responsible for conducting research and making recommendations to prevent work-related injuries, illnesses, and deaths. Its work is critical, as you've heard, to ensuring safe jobs, guiding workplace protections, and training the professionals who keep workers healthy and safe. Virtually every industry in our country relies on the work of NIOSH. NIOSH puts forth science-based recommendations to protect workers, and many industries rely on these to inform their own protective efforts, even when OSHA isn't keeping up. The NIOSH workforce, which has been eviscerated, long provided federal leadership, guidance, and decision support for our nation's workforce, along with rapid response expertise to address urgent health and safety concerns. With the current cuts, these are all gone. NIOSH has played a vital role in training the occupational health workforce for our country in advancing research to meet the needs of all workers. The dramatic cuts to NIOSH pose a direct threat to the work that we do at UIC. UIC has one of the 18 NIOSH-funded education and research centers, which fulfill the requirement from the 1970 OSHA Occupational Safety and Health Act, that NIOSH provide an adequate supply of qualified personnel to ensure safe and healthy workplaces across the US. I don't know how many children you've heard say, I would be an OSHA inspector, or an occupational safety and health researcher. They don't, because they don't know about this. UIC's Education and Research Center was among the first such centers established in the US in 1977. Since then, we have trained over 400 occupational health and safety experts, including industrial hygienists and occupational safety professionals, occupational epidemiologists, and occupational medicine physicians. These professionals have gone on to serve thousands of workers in virtually every industry and would not have gone on to serve those workers if not for these NIOSH centers. The education and research centers are the primary pipeline for the occupational safety and health workforce in this country. These centers ensure that we have industrial hygienists who monitor toxic exposures, occupational physicians who diagnose and treat work-related illnesses, and safety experts who prevent fatal injuries before they happen. Without the dependable funding that NIOSH has provided for decades, we will face a critical shortage of professionals equipped to confront emerging workplace hazards, respond to disasters, and protect the lives of millions of workers who keep this country running. Because without NIOSH, there are not these programs. In addition to our long-standing training program, UIC houses large NIOSH-funded research centers that are essential pillars in advancing worker health and safety, driving innovation, and generating critical data to prevent injury, illness, and death across diverse and high-risk industries. Without continued funding, the important work that researchers in these centers undertake will end, as will critical partnerships between these UIC centers and local organizations, unions, worker centers, and community-based groups that have been funded through NIOSH. Here are just a few examples of what we stand to lose. Without continued funding, we will lose vital mechanisms to collect data about work-related injuries and illnesses in Illinois. These are UIC specific, but these are impacts that stand across the country. The Illinois Occupational Surveillance Program, which is housed at UIC, currently monitors and analyzes patterns of work-related injuries and illnesses in our state, which then allows for targeted efforts to protect particularly at-risk workers. The NIOSH-funded Center for Agricultural Safety and Health at UIC collects data on the persistent hazards faced by agricultural workers in Illinois, particularly the migrant and seasonal farm workers who make up a critical share of our agricultural workforce. Without funding, these critical data will be lost, and so too will our ability to identify persistent and emergent threats to worker health in the state. We also stand to lose direct investment of grant funding into our communities. For the past decade, NIOSH has funded community-based projects through our UIC Center for Healthy Work, which builds power in local communities to identify and collectively address barriers to safe and healthy work, especially in worker groups who are not part of a union. The Center for Agricultural Safety and Health has also built an extensive outreach system to connect with and provide direct support to farm workers throughout our region. Without NIOSH funding, these efforts will be severely curtailed if they survive at all. These impacts are just the tip of the iceberg. The long list of programs and efforts we have to lose just at UIC are truly devastating, and the loss of NIOSH programs generally will cost lives and livelihoods. Here's what we can do. In a letter dated April 4th, more than 100 members of Congress joined multiple unions and advocacy groups in calling on our president and the Secretary of the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services to reverse the terminations at NIOSH. Unions and other organized groups should keep up the pressure in every way they can, connect with elected officials, and demand to know what steps they are taking to reverse these cuts. We should all continue to contact our elected officials. I have handouts, which my colleague Liz is passing around to you, which have some information about NIOSH and 2 QR codes that you can use to contact your representatives. I'm sure you're all very good at this by now, but in case you need a little help in specific NIOSH information, the first is a link to the AFL-CIO's online tool that helps you make a phone call to your officials and provides information specifically about NIOSH and specifically about NIOSH in your residential area. The second is a link to the American Industrial Hygiene Association's voter voice tool to contact officials via email, and they have much more, editable language in an email template. So if you're a firefighter, you can edit the template to include those details of why NIOSH is important to you. I would also encourage everyone to learn more about what NIOSH does and why its mission and activities are so integral to protecting the lives of workers here and nationally. Reach out to the federal workers you know, they're not okay. And if you can, donate to groups like the American Industrial Hygiene Association, who have specifically dedicated funds to support these workers in these trying times, specifically the workers at NIOSH. And soon the workers at OSHA. For those of you who are willing to reach out to the press, April 28th is Worker Memorial Day. This is a great opportunity for op-eds for local, state, or national papers on what dismantling NIOSH will mean for workers, industry, and communities. Urge people to contact their policymakers to share their concerns about these events. Thank you very much.
Thank you, guys. And thank you for the work that you're doing at the school. You're making sure our workplaces are safe. And it's going to be tougher now. It's going to be so much tougher. I want to, call up, Liliana Calvo, bricklayer. Lily. And, you know, think about like the hazards that she and her colleagues are deal with when they're, on the work site. So, Lily.
Thanks, Don. Thank you, everyone, for inviting me here to participate today. Thank you to CFL and to Chicago Justice. I'm looking forward for it. So yes, my name is Lily Calderon. I am a bricklayer by trade, but also a service director of health and safety for the International Union of Bricklayers and Allied Craft Workers. I'm an 18-year member at Local 21, Chicago. So I am from Chicago, but work out of DC. I spent 14 years out in the trade, boots on the ground, and I've spent the last 4 years as director of health and safety for my international union. And I work every day to figure out the best way to keep our members and all workers safe from anything that goes on in the job sites, right? And we do that by the work that NIOSH and OSHA provides, the data, the resources, all the research they do. Can't do that without them. I do want to note here that, for the record, that my opinions expressed today are of my own, and do not necessarily reflect the views and positions of the International Union of International Union of Bricklayers and Allied Craft Workers. I have to say that. So as a person who has had boots on the ground for 14 years, I know the importance of having reliable resources to keep myself and others safe and healthy while doing our jobs. By completely dismantling an agency that provides crucial health hazard evaluations and provides recommendations on how to mitigate those hazards, it puts every worker in grave danger. Not knowing what you may be exposed to every day on the job is concerning and quite frightening. We all go to work to provide for our loved ones. We work so that, I don't know why I'm getting emotional, I think this is important. Sorry.
You're okay.
Yay.
You're fine.
Tech workers from various hazards, is just wrong. And just anyway, OSHA often uses recommendations from NIOSH to develop and enforce standards that protect workers. Construction work is dangerous and the hazards are ever changing from day to day, hour to hour, minute to minute. And I can tell you it is a hazardous job, but construction, for me, I loved it. And I knew that getting on every job site, I had to watch out for those things that can harm me each and every day. Each minute, I turn the wrong way, I might fall off the scaffold. I don't have my personal protective equipment, that can hurt me, right? So it's important. Where am I? So having standards and protections so having standards and protections of potential hazards doesn't hurt the workers, it helps them. NIOSH has been extremely helpful to me and the members that we serve in protecting them from silicosis. Silicosis is a lung disease caused by inhaling crystalline silica, which is something that I was often exposed to as a bricklayer. Without the research conducted by NIOSH and their recommended controls to OSHA, all workers would continue to be exposed to this every day at their workplace. A crucial piece of protective equipment, such as a respirator, helps us stay safe while working around silica. NIOSH's Restore program, which approved and conducted testing to ensure this equipment met all their guidelines that keep workers safe. Their surveillance program, which makes sure that there is no counterfeit equipment being used by workers, is no longer. It has completely been wiped out. Without this critical program, who is to say that the next respirator I wear to help mitigate the hazard is really going to protect me and others? Or if there will be a next one. With the great cuts to OSHA and NIOSH and its capacity to, cuts to OSHA and its capacity to enforce standards, where does that leave the worker? It leaves them high and dry to fend for themselves. Most of the time with no other option other than to continue working in the hazardous environment. So it's up to us, not just the people in this room, to stand up and fight for the rights that we all deserve. This is not the time to let it play out, see what happens. We need our voices heard. We need them to fight. We need them to fight to keep these protections and to protect the agencies that is here to help workers. Go out and speak up. Speak at public hearings like this. Speak to your communities, to your members, to your coworkers, to your family. Educate them on why these agencies are important and collectively make your voices heard. Because it doesn't stop with these agencies, as we all know, and all the other agencies being gutted by the administration. And I want to end with this. Why this is an urgency for all workers, right? So Workers' Memorial Day is next week on April 28th. It's a remembrance of those workers who have lost their lives. If we don't stand up and fight, think about how many more lives we'll lose year after year if we don't stand up for the workers and the workers who help us stay safe and healthy on and off the job. Thank you.
Vice President of CM JV, Morgan United.
Thank you. Good afternoon here and everyone's watching us at home. My name is Carlos Junard and I'm a proud union member of Workers United. And I stand before you today to express my deep concerns about the newly created Department of Government Efficiency and its implications for the safety of my members, my union family, working families in the community. And I feel especially frustrated and concerned because this department is under the leadership of someone who is a fascist who was not elected, Mr. Musk.
Right.
I like efficiency as the next person. Who doesn't? But we must critically examine what is this current style of efficiency means for people and how it affects them. Instead of simply streamlining processes, the changes we are seeing have led to significant cuts to the federal workforce and vital support programs that many Workers United union members rely on. Think about NIOSH and OSHA. Think about firefighters. If something happens to firefighters, that directly affects my members immediately. With NIOSH and OSHA, all of our factories have safety because of the work you guys do. Capitalism does not like safety. It's too costly. So we've witnessed firsthand how these reductions impact union members, especially those who have dedicated their lives to public service like you guys. Some of our union siblings have faced layoffs, or reduce safety at work, while others have seen their access to essential programs diminish. This has created an atmosphere of fear and uncertainty that threatens the stability of not only our jobs, everyone's jobs, but also our communities. Oops, sorry. That's just a copy, that's okay, thank you. Elon Musk, as an elected leader of this department, you guys could go boo now. Has the power and influence to shape policies that directly affect all of our lives for many years to come. Think about that, yeah, boo, that's right, and let that sink in. Because without the accountability to voters or a commitment to the well-being and safety of workers, we are left wondering whose interests are truly being served. I'm kidding, I'm not left wondering. I do know wondering, as I know whose interests people like Musk and Trump care about, never ours. At one point, there was a growing concern that efficiency would be prioritized over empathy. That concern is gone, folks. Reality is here. This is the world we live in now, where profit is now more important than ever, and workers and their safety is completely expendable. Considering these issues, I urge collaboration between workers, unions, and policymakers to seek solutions that generally support the safety of our union citizens. We need to advocate for policies that can enhance efficiency while also protecting jobs, strengthening worker safety rules, and maintaining essential public services for those who need it most. In plain English, we need to tax the billionaires. Yeah. As I conclude, I ask this important question of all of you and our leaders, including the likes of Elon Musk. How can we create a government that truly prioritizes the welfare of its citizens and ensures that efficiency serves to uplift, not undermine the fabric of our communities? Muchas gracias for your time and for allowing me to testify in front of you today. And I look forward to starting conversations how we can work together for a brighter future for all of our working children. Thank you.
Thank you for that powerful testimony. And we're gonna keep talking about industrial. I want to call up EJ Jenkins to come up here. EJ, he's a steel worker, works at the US Steel plant, and he handles molten steel every day, right? Yeah. NIOSH, OSHA, it's important for the work you do.
Thank you, Don. Thank you to everybody from the CFL, thank you to National AFL-CIO, thank you to SCIU, SCII. I gotta give them a big shout out because that's my mother's local. Well, everyone else, Chicago Jobs and Justice, thank y'all for having this platform. Now I won't just jump right into it. Like I've been at US Steel for almost 25 years. Next month on the 8th, be 25 years. I've seen people hurt, haven't seen anyone killed. I heard about people being killed while being at work. In particular, it was about maybe 10 years ago, it was a manager that was operating without any safety equipment. Why it shows that people trying to stop him, but he ended up falling from, I believe it was a high altitude crane, fell to his death. And I'm saying that because, you know, every workplace you have like workers who try to go above and beyond, you know, and they really try to get the job done. And they would do it unsafely if they had the opportunity to do it. Well, I look at OSHA and, you know, being in the workplace with safety rules and regulations, it stops that. It stops that, the over the top work ethic. I mean, if you think for a minute, but not just shooting, making people that surround you think realistically and consciously. Because the fact is, you're not just putting your life in danger, you put a lot of other people's life in danger. And like at US Steel, what we do is we have moves from our programs. Let's show you how to live properly, show you how to bend properly. We got weight restrictions. We do class where you have to attend every year, a safety class. like it's mandatory, but it goes over everything that's going on in the mail, where we have updates, or we have changes to the rules, not OSHA rules, but the changes of like different things going on within the plan. But it keeps you updated and alerted, aware, and educated on the different things going on within the still there. So you can watch out, you can be alerted. If you see things going on or wrong, you can speak on it. That's what's really important. OSHA really gives you a voice in the workplace. That's one thing right now within probably a whole lot of facilities, but one thing you can't get fired for, and that's safety. So taking that away, that actually eliminates your voice. Not just eliminating your voice, you don't know the next person that you've been friends with for 25 years, you know that's your last day talking to them. You don't know about the family that's about to be impacted, or the community that's about to be impacted. Even the inactivists within the local, you know, that's affecting them as well. So like, I think when it comes to OSHA, and I'm bringing this up because I took a trip, I want to say like 2 years ago. And we were watching, it was another country, we watched them work outside. So they literally have a platform that's probably like 3 stories up. The guys up there, not tied off. And now, you know what I'm saying, they finished the work, and we watched them taking it down. Still not tied off. My man is like wedging his feet against the rail, saying he gotta take this whole platform down, like, row by row. And I'm like, I don't know if I should be watching this. It's probably the best complication. Because it doesn't, for one, it wasn't safe. And the way that he was moving, it's like, any second, this guy might fall. And I'm like, he falls, all this is gonna happen, is gonna bring someone else in to do the work. Like, safety in that measure, it's like, it's in a nonchalant, idea. And it shouldn't be like that. It shouldn't be like that. And for people like Elon Musk, with DOGE and DOGE, I don't know how you pronounce it, but he don't understand it. Then you got people like Trump. You have to think about these things. These cats come in here and they actually make these moves, and they strip these things that we actually hold on to every day. But the realistic idea is the fact that they have never even touched anything they even need safe. My kids stay in Vegas, and I remember going to see them. You got long lines where don't want to take care of your own workers. Well, yet people tell the worker what they need. People say, like, you know what I'm saying, what people not doing. Well, you never really been in a work facility. And it kills me to know that some of our own members are brainwashed by this. So I mean, I want Secretary Treasurer Fred Redmond on this one. You know, we need transparency within this labor. It can't be just, you know, the carpenters or electrical workers or steel workers or auto workers. We gotta kill that, because we have a bigger fight. And if one falls, we're looking for all of us to fall. And one win for them is almost a whole kill for us. Because they're not just gonna stop at one thing, they're gonna keep going. They're just trying to win one, just to actually show that you conquer this one step, that's huge. Everything else is a piece of cake. So we gotta like literally speak up for one another. We need to show up for one another. We got something going on, the firefighters got something going on, put it out, everyone show up. The steel workers got something going on, put it out, everyone show up. The AFL-CIO got something going on, put it out, everybody show up. This separatism gotta actually stop. You know what I'm saying? Because it makes their fight easier. And we be the ones that's victims of their victories. So thank y'all for having me up here. Appreciate y'all. Thank you.
And, so when a worker is hurt at the job, when there's an emergency at the job, they call the fire department, the paramedics pick them up, the ambulances, and they take them to a healthcare center. So, I mean, now, and you would think the healthcare workers, I mean, they are experiencing their own sort of health and safety issues. So, and, I love you, I mean, you have something to
I got a lot.
say, you got a lot to say about that.
So thank you again, Don. Thank you, everyone who has testified, so far today. I'm gonna really echo what you said, which is capitalism doesn't like safety. And so much so in hospital work, because hospital work is dangerous work. Hospitals are filled with, serious hazards, including patient lifting, needle sticks, slips, trips, falls, combative, patients. And hospital work is inherently dangerous because too often, as I shared before, caregivers will put their own safety at risk in favor of the safety of patients. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, the likelihood of injury or illness resulting in days away from work is higher in hospitals than in construction or manufacturing, so two industries that I've shared tonight. And in recent years, chronic short staffing has worsened the injury risk to hospital workers. Hospital and health system leaders learned the wrong lesson during the pandemic, that they can further maximize profits when they cut staffing to the bone. I'm gonna repeat that. The lesson they learned during the pandemic is when they had less healthcare workers, when it was harder to get healthcare workers, they saw profits and they said, let's continue to try this. And that is an incredibly dangerous lesson. So management regularly and intentionally compels hospital workers to work short-staffed than is consistent with their own on-the-job training and competency validations. And in these situations, without a collective bargaining agreement, we don't have a strong remedy. And when we're getting rid of NIOSH and OSHA, we still have laws on the books, but we don't have any sort of remedy. And because of their commitment to patient care, workers too often risk their own safety to continue life-saving work. Who doesn't share in this commitment to safety, as I said earlier, is management. And what I'm gonna bring to you today is a story from all the other industries' futures. So in healthcare, we've already privatized safety through the accrediting agencies of JCAHO and other similar accrediting agencies. During the pandemic, OSHA and JCAHO decided that it was too unsafe to go inside healthcare facilities and decided to have hospitals and nursing homes self-report if they were in compliance with safety, okay? We all know how that works, right? And so we have this already been third party, so my relationship with OSHA is very little because there is very few OSHA regulations inside hospital facilities, even federal facilities. The result is injury and burnout for workers, and the additional, even more severe outcome is adverse outcome for patients. There are two examples that I'm going to share about this, and one was my first kind of day on the job. I was an airline worker, and my senior fellow union member coworker said, "We're not going out to work today. There's not the proper mat in front of the podiums for us to check folks. And I think they're called stress mats, right? You see them in the kitchen, they're for tripping, but they're also because you're not supposed to stand on tile floor for long periods of time." They said, "We don't take risks like that. It's not worth it. Profit's not worth it. We don't get paid enough." And I said, well, I learned a really important lesson that day. In the early days of the pandemic, we were sitting at a bargaining table and management was saying, workers are safe. We're in-servicing them, we're making sure that everyone has proper PPE, we're making sure that everyone has been properly fit tested for the proper masks. And I said, show me that. Because my members, housekeepers, CNAs, transporters, sanitary workers say they don't have masks. And they said, yeah, we're gonna send you all over all the in-services. We finished yesterday in-servicing everyone. Well, they sent me over the list of in-services, and of our 333 members in that facility, 13 had been in-serviced because they had forgotten that our members actually come into contact with patients, and our members deserve the same safety as a doctor and a nurse because they had only in-serviced the doctors and nurses. And that was by no means unique. We then moved on to all of our other facilities and show us the insert levels or the in-service notes. And every single hospital started giving us the same information that our members had not been in service, that our housekeepers, dietaries, CNAs, were not being, and so we quickly moved. Luckily, this was in the early ends, here in Chicago in the pandemic. We knew that folks needed to be fit tested. We knew that if a doctor is wearing a mask, if a nurse was wearing a mask, we had to be wearing the exact same equipment, that our job level did not depend. And we had to fight also, to make sure that during the pandemic, new standards were developed through OSHA, again, which were just being self-reported by the employer to these agencies. So if we are getting rid of OSHA, we need to make sure that we continue to have this fight, because already in our hospitals is our members that are self-reporting, that are standing up for their own safety to be able to say, we cannot work in these conditions. And so with that, we stand with all of you today, but I'm also now going to shift over to the impact on the VA, on our federal employees. So the attack on the VA is to cut 80,000 jobs. These are 80,000 jobs that were expanded during the time of Biden. Many people in this room are either veterans or have family members who are veterans and used to experience the pain and the struggle it took to be able to get on veterans benefits. And what we have the Biden administration to thank for, and the Obama administration to thank him before that, was getting rid of the red tape. That you used to have to prove what soldier died in front of you that caused your PTSD, what exact pile of chemical weapons caused your Agent Orange exposure. And Biden and Obama said, we are going to cut through the red tape, specifically Biden with the PACT Act, and he hired 60,000 new VA workers. And our union, along with AFG, along with NNU, said we are going to fight to fill these vacancies, because our members were working short through a pandemic, but also through a huge boom in expansion of services that we could not be able to serve the veterans that were in front of us. This is an aging population. So these cuts that are being proposed by the Trump administration will absolutely lead to adverse action, not just a delay in care, but it's veterans who will not get the services that they have been promised, and these will lead to death of our veterans. So with that, we need to fight, we need to fight, and we need to fight, because when we fight, we win, and this fight is just beginning. So thank you all.
Thank you, Ann. And continuing with healthcare, I'd like to welcome Tina Godino with NNU, just to talk about the conditions as a nurse.
Jesse, Chicago, and we do need OSHA. And since the COVID-19 pandemic began, we've all depended on N95s and similar personal protective equipment to protect ourselves at work, at school, and even at home. Frontline healthcare workers depend on these life-saving devices every day to protect us from COVID-19 and other infectious diseases, and to help protect our patients too. It's critical that we can trust that these devices actually work. That's why the current administration has passed to the National Institute for Occupational Safety and Health, and the small and private government agency that certifies essential PPEs like N95s are so alarming. And NOC and NNU demands the reversal of these dangerous cuts to the NIOSH. When nurses put on N95 respirators before taking care of a patient with measles, avian flu, or COVID-19, we know it will work. That's because NIOSH workers behind the scenes are testing these devices to make sure they filter out more than 95% of the infectious particles. And it makes it safe for nurses to get gowned up, put the mask on, and go into the patient's rooms. Cutting around 20,000 workers, that's 90% of NIOSH staff, means HHS is abandoning not just certification for PPEs, but vital work against HIV/AIDS, bird flu, COVID-19, and future pandemics. And God only knows about Ebola. Every single person in this country depends on these workers to keep us safe. With those critical health and safety workers cuts from our government, the message to frontline healthcare workers from the current administration is clear. You are on your own. And that would have a deadly impact on our ability to care for our patients, our veterans, and their safety. Cuts like these are short-sighted and reckless. The current administration is eliminating and safety protection one by one, with no regard for the harm it will cause to healthcare workers and patients everywhere, all to fund tax cuts for the wealthy. But nurses won't let corporate greed compromise patient care because our patient safety is not for sale.
Yeah, continuing with, I guess right now, one of the most dangerous workplaces is are at warehouses. Because with the expansion of deliveries and getting things to and from point A to point B, these workers are probably, I mean, there's a lot of injuries, a lot of deaths that are happening at the warehouse. I'd like to welcome Carlos Cisneros with Warehouse Workers for Justice.
Hi, everybody. I remember writing this and just feeling very upset, and getting upset all over again, hearing everybody here. So I really appreciate you all sharing all of your stories. I appreciate Jobs of Justice and CFL, AFL, for this opportunity. My name is Marcos Aniceros. I am the Executive Director of Warehouse Workers for Justice. We are a nonprofit worker center. We advocate and we support and we mobilize, we organize warehouse workers, specifically unorganized warehouse workers across the northern part of the state. Temp workers, as these are temp workers as well. Many of our members are undocumented Black workers, they're Latino workers, people who already carry the weight of systemic discrimination, economic hardship, and the fear of retaliation. And now we are seeing that weight grows even heavier. Today we're talking about health and safety in the American workforce. Under the recent administration, we have watched the deliberate dismissal of OSHA's federal workers and the dissemination of the department itself. This is not just a budget cut. It's not just deregulation. I want to be clear, it's an attack on the safety of every working person in this country. Under the recent direction of DOGE and Elon Musk, we've seen OSHA hollowed out, and that has real and dangerous consequences for our members and for everyone you just heard here today. Warehouse workers already operate in some of the most physically demanding conditions. Long hours on concrete floors, sometimes 10 to 12 hours a day, most of the time. Intense production quotas, sometimes these quotas are hidden, as you've seen examples with Amazon. And little to no training or protection. This is especially true for workers that are monolingual, not English speaking, or temp workers. They don't receive the same training as other workers do. Sorry, I also lost my place here. For Black, Latino, and undocumented workers, there are even more barriers for speaking up. Fear of retaliation, fear of losing your job, fear of being blacklisted, or worse, fear of deportation. We have seen all of these threats firsthand. And when there's no one to call, no inspector to report to, what are people supposed to do? I want to share a couple of very quick stories. Just a few months ago, during a brutal cold snap, we had workers come to us and say that their warehouse refused to turn on the heat. Okay, the offices upstairs, administrative offices upstairs were nice, warm, and cozy. But workers on the shop floor, in the break rooms, and even in the bathrooms, they were freezing. Workers were bundled up, trying to do their jobs with numb hands, burned faces, and no relief. And in fact, were getting threatened with discipline because they were wearing, beanies on their heads or gloves. And so they had really nothing else to do. There were no OSHA inspectors to call, no hotline that was going to send someone out in time. This is also at the very time when Tom Homan was in town with ICE threatening deportation of all of these people. So there was already that extra layer of fear. And so people were coming to our office, not sure what to do, upset and crying, and they just want to work. But they felt like they really couldn't speak up, and they felt that this wasn't fair, and they were all getting hurt. So we had to get creative on how to organize this group of people. We organized them and we mobilized them. We put pressure on the company from every angle we could think of. And after several days of nonstop effort, we finally were able to get them to turn on the heat. And think about that, this is to turn on the heat, okay? But think about that, workers have to fight to do all of this just to be warm in the workplace. And this is, again, we've seen workers who fight in the same way to get protective gear, right? To get glasses because they're working with acid where splashes to splash on the face or on their arms. And so we're facing the same kind of issue with workers that have all kinds of layers that aren't able to organize. We've been able to use OSHA to be able to find an avenue to address these issues with these workers. Now, let's talk very briefly about what everybody thinks about when we talk about warehouses. We're talking about Amazon. So, So Amazon injury rate in its warehouses is significantly higher than the industry average, with some reports indicating it can be double or even triple the rate of other warehouses. Additionally, Amazon's injury rates are not just higher in frequency, but also in severity, with a higher rate of serious injuries requiring lost time or restricted duty. What is this going to mean for workers now? That's the America that we are living in when health and safety are treated as optional. And make no mistake, Elon Musk and DOGE and others like them have championed a culture where freedom means freedom to cut corners, endanger lives, and silence workers in the name of profit. They call it innovation, we call it exploitation. So what I would say to Elon Musk or our Congress people is come and spend a shift on that freezing warehouse floor or without any protective gear. And let's see how much they feel then. And what do we say to our congressmen? And you should call your congress people. You should. They need to know that we are paying attention and we need to light a fire, where. So to our congress people, they need to reinvest in OSHA and NIOSH. Restore its funding, hire inspectors and researchers, and pass laws that protect workers, especially undocumented and marginalized workers, because they make the economy move, right? And pass laws that protect them when they speak up about safety. That's my message to the General Assembly here in Illinois as well, because they're down in Springfield. We need to make sure that everybody knows that we need to protect this workforce as much as possible. And then to everyone listening here, let's remember, it's organize, organize, organize. Let's remember that the people who move our packages, restock our shelves, and keep the supply chain and the economy running are truly an essential workforce. That's why we need investment in our workforces, in our unions and organizations doing the work. Train more workers to organize themselves, to be more militant. We need more political education and how to use the power that we have to get those concessions, and that's our labor. That's the anti-Musk and the anti-Trump, right? Investment, democracy, collaboration, solidarity, and organizing ourselves and our labor together. Thank you.
I want to circle back to the School of Public Health. They've worked with warehouse workers with justice, and all these other workplaces to shed a light on the dangers there. I want to ask Ron, you were going to say a few words about some of the great work that they've been doing as well, some of the research, right?
Well, not quite. Actually, a little different than that, but I'm actually going to pose an idea. So my name is Ron Nymark. I am a student at the UIC School of Public Health Department of Environmental Occupational Health Sciences. And I'm also the student liaison for the Occupational Health section of the American Public Health Association. Before graduate school, I worked as a union organizer and representative for various organizations across the US for 24 years, including affiliates of SEIU, AFT, NNU, including with Ann here. The views I'm about to share are my own and do not necessarily reflect the positions of APHA or any of the other organizations I'm affiliated with.
APHA, that's okay.
Okay, so maybe some of them do, I guess. The APHA has taken a strong stance in defense of NIOSH. The organization is pursuing legal strategies, public advocacy, public education to protect the public health workforce and infrastructure. As part of occupational health section, I've seen firsthand how researchers, labor allies, public health professionals are mobilizing to raise awareness and push back against efforts to weaken NIOSH's mission. As others have shared tonight, the threats facing NIOSH must be fought because the implications for worker health and safety across the country are profound. But while we fight to protect NIOSH and OSHA, and to protect the federal civil servants from this administration, we must also prepare for a future in which the state takes a greater role in protecting workers. In Illinois, that means beginning a serious exploration of empowering the Illinois Occupational Safety and Health Administration to take jurisdiction over private sector workplaces. 28 states and territories, including Illinois, operate OSHA-approved state plans that cover public sector workplaces. 22 of them also have jurisdiction over private sector workplace enforcement. There is no reason that Illinois, a national leader in labor rights, should not consider doing the same. And for our neighbors in Wisconsin and Missouri and other states with no OSHA state plan, they should adopt state plans that at least cover public sector workers and stop the practice of leaving their state and public workforce with no worker safety protection at all. For Illinois, this is not just about enforcement, it's about autonomy, responsiveness, and building a system that reflects the real needs of Illinois workers. And that must include an infrastructure for research and education. For that, we should also look to the Illinois Workers' Compensation Commission as a key player in the future of worker safety. Right now, the commission primarily adjudicates claims and maintains injury records, but it could do more. In California, workers' compensation fund support programs like the Labor Occupational Health Program at the University of California, Berkeley, and the Occupational Health Surveillance and Education Program, which train workers, track injury patterns, and create tools for prevention. Washington State's SHARP program, Safety and Health Assessment and Research for Prevention, offers another leading model. Funded by workers' comp premiums, SHARP conducts research, develops interventions, and partners with unions and employers. Illinois should follow their lead to prevent, not just respond to injuries, by investing a portion of workers' compensation funds into statewide and local research, surveillance, training, and community partnership, especially with university-based education and research centers, worker centers, unions, and city and county health departments and labor enforcement agencies. Together, we can build preventive infrastructure that puts power and knowledge in worker hands. Worker power and knowledge are essential. That means ensuring workers are consulted and empowered with the tools, training, and legal authority to shape safer workplaces. In short, protecting NIOSH is urgent, but building something stronger and more substantial right here in Illinois is essential. A worker-centered, research-informed, state-empowered safety system is within reach. Let's get to work. Thank you.
We've heard a lot of great testimony this evening, and I want to thank everybody who spoke and offered some testimony. I'm gonna turn it over to Secretary Treasurer Redmond. Oh,
Micah. I have to read Micah.
oh, you got a statement from Micah? Okay, go ahead.
Okay. So there were some folks that wanted to share their testimony, but they live far away. And they're on Zoom right now, so. One of those, is, a friend of ours from Apogee in Cincinnati named Micah. And before I read her testimony, I just wanted to, she texted me and said that she didn't realize that, firefighters were gonna be here. And, she wanted me to mention that she researches firefighters' exposure during lithium-ion, battery and electric vehicle fires. It's a growing hazard that we know very little about when it comes to potentially toxic exposure. Her research project has been cut short since she's being laid off. So. All right. So this is from, and Micah, I'm sorry, I don't say her name. Micah, Niemeyer Walsh, PhD, Vice President of AFG 3840. Thank you for inviting me to participate in today's hearing, and thank you for allowing me the opportunity to speak about the attacks against the National Institute for Occupational Safety and Health, NIOSH. My name is Dr. Micah Niemeyer Walsh. I am Vice President of the American Federation of Government Employees Local 3840, representing employees at CDC, NIOSH, and Cincinnati, Ohio. I am part of the firefighter health team, which includes the National Firefighter Registry for Cancer. I would like to state for the record that the opinions expressed today are my own and do not necessarily reflect the views or positions of the Institute, agency, or federal government. On April 1st, as part of the DOGE and billionaire class agenda, RFK Jr. began terminating over 90% of our staff, including me, effectively shutting down our agency. If this is allowed to proceed, it will have a devastating impact on every single working person in this country. Today, I'm not just speaking for the hundreds of federal workers who stand to lose their jobs. I'm speaking for millions of workers across the country whose lives depend on what NIOSH does every single day. NIOSH was created in 1970 through the Occupational Safety and the Occupational Safety Act. We are the only federal agency whose entire mission is to conduct research to prevent workers from getting injured, sick, or killed on the job. So the proposed reduction in force at NIOSH isn't just a staffing cut. It's a direct attack on every single worker in this country. Let me be very clear. If you eliminate NIOSH, workers will die. Families will be shattered, and communities across the country will feel the ripple effects of that loss. NIOSH is the reason you have access to safe, effective respirators. It's the reason minors have health surveillance. It's the reason nurses, teachers, manufacturing workers, even children working summer jobs have science-backed safeguards. NIOSH investigates deadly chemical exposures, designs low-cost safety controls, responds to outbreaks of respiratory illnesses, supports first responders after disasters, and partners with labor, industry, and local governments across all 50 states. We are an agency doing work that no one else does. RFK Jr. has promised that the cuts and restructuring of HHS won't impact science and health. This is a lie. When RFK cuts NIOSH, here are some of what he's actually cutting. Cancer research for 9/11 responders and all US firefighters. Surveillance programs that track workplace injuries before they become epidemics. Respirator testing and certification. If you've ever worn an N95 respirator, you've seen the NIOSH logo. We make sure manufacturers don't cut corners and that respirators are actually protecting you. Investigations into workplace violence and mental health crisis among teachers and healthcare workers. Research on new and emerging workplace hazards, such as new chemicals used by an industry or new technology used in the workplace. What's more, the science NIOSH produces underpins OSHA's ability to enforce the law. You don't get safer workplaces without the science to back up new recommendations and regulations. NIOSH research isn't government waste. It isn't bureaucracy. NIOSH's entire budget is just $2.20 per worker per year. But the return on investment is massive. Lives saved, families kept whole, billions of dollars in healthcare and lost productivity prevented. And make no mistake, this is about every worker in every state, on every job site, in every hospital, in every school and factory in this country. This impacts the workers in Illinois just as much as it impacts the workers in West Virginia, the workers in Michigan, and the workers in Louisiana. This is about ensuring that no one has to choose between a paycheck and their health. That no family has to bury a loved one because a hazard went unchecked. If this cut is allowed to proceed, we lose the backbone of occupational health in America. We lose the people who know how to respond when a fire chief calls and says, "My crew is getting sick." When a nurse asks, "Is my infertility linked to my job?" When a warehouse worker says, "Is this dust going to kill me?" We are talking about real people, real consequences, real lives on the line. Safe and healthy working conditions was the right that the working people of this country fought for and won in the 1970s. And this is what they are trying to take away from you. In order to fight back against these attacks on your rights, it's absolutely crucial that we all get organized. If you are in a union, become more active. If you're not in a union, start one. It is absolutely crucial that federal employee unions, private sector unions, and the community come together to act in unison to crush this authoritarian attempt to take away our essential services and strip us of our rights. And we shouldn't stop there. As the saying goes, the best defense is a good offense. We don't just want to defend the limited rights we have, but to expand them and win new ones. On May 1st, International Workers' Day, there will be events held across the country. Make sure you're there to make your voice heard. We all need to keep showing up so that we can show them that the working class is not giving up and we're not going back. Thank you for the opportunity to testify, and I would be pleased to answer any questions you may have. I am not Micah. I would also like to submit the testimonies of my other NIOSH coworkers, both named and unnamed. Ready, Don?
Yeah,
I'm supposed to, yeah.
you can slam it on the table.
All right, we'll do it.
Put it on the table.
All
Oh,
right.
yeah, right.
Okay, I'm gonna give it to Fred.
Leave it, we'll get.
All right, Fred, here you go.
Thank you, Micah. Turn it over to Secretary Treasurer Redmond.
Well, look, thank y'all. This has really been an enlightening evening. I know it's been a long evening, so we're not gonna hold everybody. But let me just say this, I appreciate the fact that, but it's a shame that we have to come forward and make sure that our employer cannot associate us with statements that are true. Because of retaliation, because of infringement on our First Amendment rights. But let me just say, the AFL-CIO, we represent 63 national unions throughout this country, total of over 15 million members. And all 63 of our unions are in unison, that there's no other greater priority for the labor movement than to ensure the safety and health of all of our members. And we feel very, very strong about that. This attack on OSHA and NIOSH is amongst the people who sit around our executive board at the AFL-CIO is appalling. It's our first priority is to make sure that our legislators, our people who in the federal government, who hold these positions in the White House, understand the position of workers throughout this country, particularly on this particular issue. And I do just want to close out by saying, some of the members of the AFL-CIO board, their positions was well related tonight. And I want to just thank all of you. On behalf of Ed Kelly, the president of the National Association of Firefighters, members of our board, Everett Kelly, President of the American Federation of Government Employees, April Barrett, President of FCIU, Dave McCall, President of the United Steelworkers, and Bonnie Castillo, the President of the National Nurses United. You really spoke on behalf of those national presidents who is fighting this fight through our executive board at the AFL-CIO every day. And we could not do that without our community partners and allies from worker centers, our activists from our organizations that's really standing up for workers' rights. So as we continue to go around the country with this testimony and make sure that we are going to make sure that your voices are being heard and the voices of workers around the country, we'll take these testimonies with us. I want you to know that we're gonna take that with us and get it into the record. But, look, I just wanna thank y'all for coming out tonight. We are in a critical times, but the only way that we can defeat what's coming at us is through a united labor movement. Okay, all of us working together, standing up for workers throughout this country, and that we intend to do, and we're gonna do. We're not gonna quit until we win a better day for American workers. So thank y'all very much.
Yeah, thank you, Secretary Treasurer Redmond, and also thank you for your leadership, you and and President Liz Schuler. I mean, we need your leadership at this moment in the fight, because here we're fighting in Chicago, we fight in Chicago all the time. But you're in Washington, and just keep fighting and fighting and fighting. And the fight continues this whole week, the next 2 weeks. Coming up, we have, May Day, March and Rally on May. Posters up there. Also, Workers' Memorial Day on the 28th. And we're gonna hold up our firefighters. It's gonna be at the Stockyard Gates and also the firefighter memorial at the Stockyard Gates. 7 AM?
7 AM.
7 AM, that's when the shift changed, right? The firefighter shift change. And 5K for May Day is this Sunday, as well as Mother Jones's birthday at the Irish Heritage Center on Sunday afternoon. So 3 to 5 PM. So we have a busy last couple weeks of April.
No sleep till May Day.
Well, no, and the fight, even after May Day, we're gonna keep fighting, right? It doesn't end there. But again, thank you for the testimony, this is very sobering word. And I really appreciate you all for being here, and have a good night, solidarity forever.
Yeah,